I spent 4 years in the Navy on aircraft carrier. I was in a F-18 squadron, and I started out at, that's actually my uniform right there, my flight deck uniform. I started out as a plane captain, which basically you're in charge of an aircraft. You pretty much do everything but fly it. I did all the inspections on it, set it up for the pilot, washed it, did all the things. And then later, I was what was called a striker. And what that means is the recruiter talks you into joining without a job. Because it sounds great, they make it sound wonderful. They're like, you can choose whatever you want. But realistically, it means you're kind of just floating around and can kind of do like the lowest level jobs, which is being a plane captain. Even though I had a lot of fun with it, I'm very thankful for it. I'm glad, in hindsight, I'm glad I did it, but it's definitely not what I recommend other people doing when they ask my advice when they sign up. But I spent about a year and a half doing that before I struck AO, which is Aviation Ordnance. And that's basically loading bombs and missiles, dealing with our 50 cal gun that's in the nose of the aircraft. I did 2 cruise deployments. The first one was 6 months long. The second one was in '02 after the war started. Or what had happened was we were there for 6 months, and then the war started, so we got extended for another 3 months and then a month to come home. So we were out actually a full 10 months. Did that cruise, and then there were several other little deployments in between that weren't combat related, but were more, just training missions in a bunch of cool different places. I've gotten to see a lot of the world. I got to go to Australia several times, several places in the Middle East, Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, and most of the 50 states. We did a dead in Alaska, and I did a RIMPAC in Hawaii, so 2 RIMPACs in Hawaii. But just to kind of get to, I'll go ahead and go through my pictures and then kind of talk a little bit as we go. Alright, so some of you might remember this, depending on how old you are, but this was the Abraham Lincoln. This was my ship, and this was the ship that President Bush at the time flew onto to give his big mission accomplished speech. And that was us manning the rails in San Diego on that day. We pulled in. He actually flew himself out in an S3 and landed on the flight deck. I don't know if he was actually flying or if he was just sitting in the cockpit, but because that's a multi people can sit in that jet, but or in that airplane. But anyway, he flew on and gave his speech that morning. My dad's favorite thing to talk about on that day was he wasn't one to call in or be late, but he was working out of town. He always told me that he stayed late that morning and didn't go to work on time so he could stay and watch. So, this is one of my good friends. I'm not in this picture, but this is one of my good friends here in the front. And these are some of the missiles that we loaded. Those are called Phoenixes. We, during the war, we wrote little special notes. This is probably one of the only appropriate ones I could show, but we would write little notes on the bombs in grease pencil. Okay, I am actually in this picture. This is my face right here, and this is us loading. This is how we would load a 500 pounds, so it's manual. So you would have 3 people in the front, 2 people in the back, and then the team leader in the middle who would actually kind of guide the bomb, make sure it was lashed before we let go. And that's just some of my crew one morning. That's us during the war. We had to carry gas masks with us all the time, which was just, we had an enormous tool pouch on one side and a gas mask pouch on the other side. So that's one of my jets about to take off. That's me and my LPO. That was the last day of my very last jet. So we were flying all the airplanes off. When you pull it, when the ship pulls in, no airplanes are on deck. We fly everything off, and they all go back home. They get to go home like a day early. They all get to go home before we actually pull in. I'm pretty sure that's a safety issue. So this is this area where all the weapons are here in front. Usually in like peacetime, all of that stuff would be behind what this is called the island. It's that big part of the aircraft carrier that kind of stands up. But all of that usually is behind it. It's called the bomb farm. But we were loading this was actually after the war started. We were loading so much ordnance that the part in front of it also kind of became the bomb farm, and we were literally loading these things as quickly as they could come up. In normal peacetime, our sorties were they usually started about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, and would go until just after dark for any pilots that needed to get night calls. But when the war started, our squadron actually flew 24 hours because we were actually the very first squadron to ever take F-18 E's, the Super Hornets, into actually out to sea, and then ended up being into war. These, if you're around then, you probably heard on the news about the big JDAM bombs that were the bunker busters. That's what this is right here, and that's primarily what my squadron was loading, because we could carry 4 at a time. Those are 2,000-pound bombs. So pretty fun and exciting. One of the things that I learned really quick was it was important to get as many qualifications as you can, because then you kind of got to do some of the fun stuff, because it made you a little bit more valuable. Like I was talking about earlier, I got plane captain qualified, which was the first part. And that's basically when the pilot gets in the seat, if you've ever seen Top Gun or anything like that in the beginning, where there's somebody doing hand signals and guiding the pilot through kind of a pre-flight. That's what a plane captain was. And then of course I was ordnance qualified and team leader qualified for ordnance, which if you say you were going on a jet and you had to go early or stay back, I would have to like arm the gun. So that was really important. Because the gun had to be armed every time the airplane took off. But what I'm doing right here is this is another qualification I could get called final checker qual. And that means that I was the very last person to touch the jet and go through while it's sitting on the cat. You would go through, touch everything, make sure all the fasteners were closed, things like that, anything that could make the engine fought out. So that's me giving a thumbs up to the shooter, telling them that it's ready to go. So I actually, with all 3 of those quals, they could send me in place of 2 other people. So they were only sending 1 person instead of 3 people. Let's see. So when you were plane captain, when you make plane captain, you got to have your name on your jet. And so that's my name on the jet. This is a jet in Fallon, Nevada. This is, Top Gun really isn't a thing anymore. This is the closest thing we have now, is Fallon in Fallon, Nevada we go, and that's where the pilots do most of the training missions on, dropping bombs. So we don't really do what's called dogfighting so much anymore. They don't really train that anymore because we don't really fight anybody that has airplanes compatible with us. That's my chief being the team leader there. That's another one of those 500-pounders. Those yellow stripes, this would have been in Fallon probably too. Those yellow stripes mean that's inert, which means it isn't live. It's just a practice bomb. This is a Sparrow. This would go on like the outside wing of the jet. It's a missile. And I love this picture. I actually didn't have this picture until just recently. It's one of the beautiful things about the internet is you can find things that you didn't have. But this is actually during the war, and as soon as I was flipping through pictures, this was literally just a Google, like an image on Google. I'm flipping through the pictures, and I recognized my team right away, because this is Bratton, and I could just, like, as soon as I saw him, I'm like, oh, that's Bratton. So I was like, oh, I want to save this picture. This is during the war. You got your JDAMs down here. I didn't even realize I'm in this picture. But if you look, I'm right here looking upset. And the reason is, if you'll see their lenses, they're dark, mine are clear. So what this means is I was working night check at the time. So I'd probably been up for 13, 14 hours already. And it looks like it's probably midday and I was still awake and upset. So I was probably really tired, really ready to go to bed, and that's what happened once the war started. Our 12-hour shifts became however long we needed to stay, because what typically happens is day check usually handles the flight sorties. The night check will handle like all of the inspections that we have to do, which is a lot. All of our launchers have to have like 14-day inspections on them. There's just a lot of maintenance to do behind the scenes with these things to keep them flying. I was lucky enough to, the first year and a half we had the Charlie Hornets, which were a little bit older, but having these new jets were amazing. The people who had like F-14 Tomcats, those poor people, they couldn't keep those things in the air. They broke constantly, even when they were new. But because we couldn't get the maintenance done at night anymore because we were flying 24 hours a day, that shift would just have to hold over and do all the maintenance that needed to be done for the day before they could go to sleep, while the oncoming shift handled all the flight sorties. So it made for a lot of long days. 3 months of really long days. So this would, I can tell by the way everyone's dressed, this is the debt to Alaska, because it was cold. In fact, we were pretty much told if we fell off the ship, there's no way they could get a helicopter to us in time before we died of hypothermia. So staying on was pretty imperative. And you would be really shocked at how many people get blown off aircraft carriers. Like, it happens pretty often. But luckily nobody did on that day. Okay, I think that's a repeat of me final checking again. This is a picture of, this is actually on a Charlie, it's one of the older jets. But in this compartment right here, what they're doing is they're taking the gun out. Actually, the gun's right here. That's that 50 cal that goes in the nose. I personally did not like that thing. There's another picture of it. It was impossible to clean and impossible to load. To put ammunition in it, you had to hook up to this door right here and hand crank all, I think, 300 shells that went in it. It was a nightmare. And there's George Bush giving his speech, and I'm somewhere on him. And that's right after he landed. That's me on the flight line in Fallon, Nevada. Looking pretty happy. That's us loading a Sparrow. Loading a Sparrow because I'm in hills, so you can't tell. But I'm only like 5'1". So loading Sparrows was probably one of the hardest things I had to do because I was up on tiptoes. This is some after 9/11. My squadron kind of adopted this one fire station in New York, and a lot of our pilots still go up every September 11th to kind of do their ceremony with them, but we kind of adopted them, and all of our jets, we have an artist in our squadron, and they did nose art on all of our jets, kind of dedicating little things to 9/11. So they were all painted like that once Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraq started. And those are these are little practice bombs. They're like little 50-pounders. And that's us on a day that we were probably getting supplies. That's a supply ship right beside us, and you can see the helicopter here. That's how they got supplies over to our ship. And then they would also hook up big fuel lines to the ship. Pretty tedious work, and we would actually take on fuel, because you can imagine how much jet fuel we were going through in just a day. It was good for us though, because we got the day off. Any questions?